Admiral Kythvar stood before the massive viewing screen of his command ship, watching the small blue planet that had consumed his thoughts for 47 years. Earth spun slowly in the darkness of space, unaware that it had been under observation since humans first sent radio signals into the void. The Vorthak fleet remained hidden behind the gas giant they called Nexus 7, but humans knew it as Jupiter. From this distance, Earth looked peaceful, but Kythvar knew better. The war room buzzed with activity as his strategists updated their plans. Holographic displays showed Earth's continents divided by red lines that marked areas of conflict. Numbers scrolled across screens showing casualty counts from wars that the Vorthak had carefully influenced. Social media statistics revealed how successfully they had spread division among the human population. Every piece of data confirmed what Kythvar had believed from the beginning. Humans were their own worst enemy. Admiral, the final phase preparations are complete, announced his chief strategist Morthek. The tall, gray-skinned alien gestured toward a complex diagram showing communication networks across Earth. Our infiltration protocols have been active for 47 years. Human society is more divided now than at any point in their recorded history. Kythvar nodded slowly. The Vorthak had conquered 17 worlds using variations of the same strategy. Find a species' weaknesses, exploit their natural divisions, then sweep in to claim the pieces. But humans had proven different from every other species they had encountered. Most intelligent races followed predictable patterns of behavior based on logic and self-preservation. Humans seemed to thrive on chaos and contradiction. The discovery of Earth had initially terrified the Vorthak High Command. Early observations showed a species capable of incredible violence, yet also capable of remarkable cooperation. Humans could love and hate with equal intensity. They could create beautiful art while simultaneously developing weapons of mass destruction. They could unite to face natural disasters, then immediately return to fighting each other over resources or ideas. This unpredictability made humans dangerous in ways that raw military strength could not. The Vorthak possessed superior technology and had eliminated species far more physically powerful than humans. But they had learned that trying to predict human behavior in combat was nearly impossible. Humans would sacrifice themselves for strangers, fight impossible odds, and refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. The solution had been elegant in its simplicity. Let humans destroy themselves. Rather than risk a direct confrontation with an unpredictable enemy, the Vorthak would turn humanity's greatest weakness into their downfall. Human tribalism and tendency toward conflict would be amplified until the species collapsed under the weight of its own divisions. The operation had begun 47 years ago, when Vorthak communication specialists first intercepted human radio transmissions. Teams of xenopsychologists studied human behavior patterns, identifying the cognitive biases and emotional triggers that could be exploited. They learned about human concepts like nationalism, racism, religious extremism, and political ideology. They discovered how humans formed in-groups and out-groups, how they responded to fear and uncertainty, and how they could be manipulated through carefully crafted messages. The first phase involved passive observation and data collection. Vorthak listening posts monitored every form of human communication they could intercept. Television broadcasts, radio signals, internet traffic, and satellite communications all provided insights into human psychology and social structures. They mapped the relationships between different human groups, identifying existing tensions that could be exploited. Phase 2 began 23 years ago with subtle signal injection. Vorthak technology could insert messages into human communication networks without detection. These messages were designed to amplify existing fears and prejudices. A news story about economic problems might be subtly altered to blame a specific ethnic group. Social media algorithms would be influenced to show users increasingly extreme content. Political advertisements would be modified to provoke stronger emotional responses. The changes were so gradual that humans never noticed the manipulation. Each generation grew up in a world slightly more divided than the previous one. Social media platforms that had been designed to connect people instead became tools for spreading hatred and misinformation. News outlets that had once provided Balanced reporting began pushing increasingly partisan viewpoints. Political leaders who had once sought compromise found themselves forced into more extreme positions to satisfy their radicalized supporters. Dr. Hana Kim worked late in her laboratory at the Seoul Institute of Technology, unaware that her research was being monitored by alien observers. Her quantum communication project had the potential to revolutionize human technology, but the Vorthak saw it as a threat to their manipulation efforts. Quantum encryption would make their signal injection much more difficult. They had already begun planning ways to sabotage her work through carefully orchestrated accidents and funding cuts. Meanwhile, Dr. Minho Park analyzed deep space radio signals in the basement of the same building. His work on pattern recognition and cosmic background radiation had led him to notice anomalies that didn't match any known natural phenomena. The signals appeared to be artificial, but no human technology could produce them. He had spent months trying to decode the patterns, not knowing that he was intercepting fragments of Vorthak communications. Captain Jaewon Lee reviewed intelligence reports in a secure facility across the city. As part of the Korean Space Defense Force, he had been tracking suspicious activities around the globe. Social media algorithms seemed designed to promote conflict rather than connection. Several world leaders had made decisions that contradicted their known psychological profiles. Economic markets showed signs of artificial manipulation that benefited no identifiable human actors. The Vorthak observers noted these individuals with concern. Humans like Dr. Kim, Dr. Park, and Captain Lee represented the greatest threat to their operation. These were humans who asked questions, noticed patterns, and refused to accept simple explanations. Throughout history, such individuals had been responsible for major breakthroughs that advanced human civilization. The Vorthak had learned to identify and neutralize these threats before they could disrupt their plans. General Sunho Choi commanded the Korean military's space operations from his headquarters in Seoul. He had been a soldier for 30 years and had developed an instinct for recognizing when something was wrong. Global conflicts were escalating with suspicious coordination. Terrorist attacks occurred with timing that seemed designed to maximize political impact rather than military effectiveness. International negotiations failed in ways that benefited no participating nation. His daughter, communications specialist Yoona Choi, worked in the same facility monitoring international diplomatic channels. She had noticed patterns in global communications that suggested outside interference. Message routing showed anomalies that couldn't be explained by known technology or human behavior. Diplomatic cables contained subtle inconsistencies that indicated possible tampering. Across the city, civilian hacker Dongwoo Nam worked from his apartment, investigating social media manipulation. He had been tracking bot networks and artificial intelligence systems that seemed designed to spread division rather than sell products or gather information. The algorithms were too sophisticated to be the work of any government or corporation he knew about. They showed signs of a coordination and purpose that suggested a single controlling intelligence. All of these humans were getting close to discovering the truth, but the Vorthak believed they still had time to complete their plan. The final phase would begin within days. A carefully orchestrated false flag operation would trigger a global conflict that would devastate human civilization. Nuclear weapons would turn Earth cities into radioactive wastelands. The survivors would be too few and too weakened to resist conquest. Admiral Kithvar smiled as he watched the blue planet spin in the darkness. Soon, Earth would join the Vorthak Empire as its 18th conquered world. The species that had once seemed so dangerous would become just another entry in their catalog of defeated civilizations. The 47 years of patient scheming were about to pay off in the most spectacular victory in Vorthak history. He had no way of knowing that humanity's greatest strength was not their capacity for conflict, but their ability to unite when facing a common threat. The Vorthak had studied human warfare extensively, but they had failed to understand human cooperation. They had observed human divisions without recognizing human adaptability. In their arrogance, they had created the very conditions that would lead to their own destruction. The countdown to the final phase continued, and Earth remained unaware of the threat lurking in the shadows of their solar system. But time was Running out for both species in the next few days would determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galactic balance of power. Dr. Hana Kim was calibrating her quantum communication array when the entire system suddenly came alive at 3:47 in the morning. Lights flashed across her control panels as signals flooded in from deep space. She had been working late again, trying to solve a problem with signal interference that had been plaguing her experiments for weeks. Now she realized that the interference had not been random noise at all. The signals were clearly artificial and clearly not human in origin. They carried mathematical patterns that no Earth technology could produce. More disturbing was their target. Every major communication satellite orbiting Earth was receiving these transmissions. Dr. Kim watched in fascination and growing alarm as her equipment decoded fragments of the alien messages. The content made her blood run cold. She grabbed her phone and called Dr. Minho Park, who answered on the first ring despite the early hour. "Minho, you need to get to the lab right now," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm receiving those signals you've been tracking, but they're not coming from space. They're being transmitted to Earth." Dr. Park arrived within 20 minutes, still wearing his pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. He took one look at Dr. Kim's displays and felt his stomach drop. The patterns he had been analyzing for months were right there, but now he could see their true purpose. They were not random cosmic phenomena, but carefully crafted messages designed to interfere with human communications. "These signals are being injected into our networks," Dr. Park said, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he analyzed the data. "Look at this timing pattern. Every burst coincides with major news events or social media trending topics. Someone is manipulating our information systems." Dr. Kim pulled up her research on quantum encryption protocols. "I've been trying to develop secure communications for the Space Defense Force. But if these signals can penetrate our current systems, they could be altering messages without anyone knowing." She pointed to a series of subtle modifications in the alien transmissions. "These aren't just listening to us. They're changing what we say to each other." The two scientists worked through the night, tracing the signals back to their source. The transmissions were coming from somewhere in the outer solar system, beyond the range of human detection equipment. More alarming was the sophistication of the interference patterns. Whoever was sending these signals understood human psychology and technology better than humans understood themselves. At dawn, Dr. Kim called Captain Jaewon Lee. She had worked with the Korean Space Defense Force before, providing technical consultation on communication security. Captain Lee listened to her explanation with growing concern, then immediately requested an emergency meeting at his headquarters. Within 2 hours, Captain Lee was standing in Dr. Kim's laboratory with his team of intelligence analysts. They watched as she demonstrated how the alien signals could modify human communications in real time. A news broadcast about economic problems could be altered to blame specific ethnic groups. Social media posts could be changed to promote more extreme viewpoints. Even private messages between government officials could be subtly modified to create misunderstandings. "How long has this been going on?" Captain Lee asked, though he already suspected the answer would be disturbing. Dr. Park consulted his analysis of the signal patterns. "Based on the data I've collected, I'd estimate at least 20 years, possibly longer. The early signals were much simpler, but they've become increasingly sophisticated over time. It's like someone has been learning how to manipulate us more effectively." Captain Lee immediately contacted his superior, General Sun-Ho Choi. The general arrived with his daughter, communications specialist Yuna Choi, who had been investigating similar anomalies in diplomatic channels. When she saw the evidence that Dr. Kim and Dr. Park had gathered, she realized that her suspicions had been correct. "I've been tracking inconsistencies in international communications for months," Specialist Choi explained. "Messages between allied nations sometimes contained subtle changes that created diplomatic tensions. I thought it was equipment malfunction or human error, but this explains everything." General Choi studied the data with the eye of a career military officer. "If someone can manipulate our communications this extensively, they could be influencing political decisions, military strategies, even economic policies. How many conflicts might have been started or escalated by these modifications?" The group spent the morning analyzing recent global events through the lens of their new discovery. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Every major international crisis of the past decade showed signs of artificial amplification. Natural disagreements between nations had been turned into hostile confrontations. Regional conflicts had been escalated into broader wars. Social movements had been radicalized to promote violence rather than change. Captain Lee made a decision that would change the course of human history. We need to bring in someone who understands these systems from the outside. I know a civilian hacker who's been investigating social media manipulation. His name is Dongwoo Nam. Dongwoo Nam arrived at the military facility that afternoon, nervous about being called in by the Space Defense Force. He relaxed when he saw the evidence they had gathered. "I've been tracking these patterns for 2 years," he said excitedly. "I knew something was coordinating the bot networks and manipulation algorithms, but I couldn't figure out what it was." He connected his laptop to their system and showed them his research. "Look at this network topology. The manipulation isn't random. There's a clear intelligence behind it, something that understands human psychology better than any artificial intelligence we've developed. It's like someone has been studying us for decades and learning how to push our buttons more effectively." Dr. Kim realized the implications first. If they've been studying us for decades, that means they've been planning something for a long time. All this manipulation isn't random chaos. It's preparation for something bigger. The team worked through the night, combining their different areas of expertise to piece together the full scope of the threat. Dr. Kim's quantum communication technology allowed them to trace the alien signals more precisely. Dr. Park's pattern analysis revealed the mathematical structure underlying the manipulation protocols. Captain Lee's military intelligence provided context about global conflicts that had been artificially amplified. General Choi's strategic experience helped them understand the ultimate goal. Specialist Choi's communication analysis showed how diplomatic relations had been systematically undermined. Dongwoo's hacking skills let them trace the manipulation back through layers of compromised systems. By dawn of the second day, they had reconstructed the basic outline of the alien plan. For decades, unknown entities had been studying human behavior and learning how to exploit human weaknesses. They had identified the psychological triggers that could turn cooperation into conflict, the cognitive biases that could be manipulated to promote division, and the social structures that could be used to spread chaos. The manipulation had been gradually increasing in intensity over time. Early interventions had been subtle, simply amplifying existing tensions. More recent operations had been actively creating new conflicts where none had existed before. The progression suggested that the manipulators were building towards some kind of climax. "They're weakening us," General Choi concluded, "dividing us against ourselves so that we'll be easier to conquer when they finally reveal themselves." Dr. Park had been analyzing the most recent signal intercepts when he made a chilling discovery. "There's a new pattern in the transmissions. It's like a countdown sequence, but it's not measuring time, it's measuring something else." He pulled up a graph showing signal intensity over the past week. "Whatever they're planning, it's about to happen." Dongwoo confirmed the analysis from his perspective. The manipulation algorithms have shifted into a new mode. Instead of gradual influence, they're now pushing for immediate, extreme responses. Social media is being flooded with content designed to provoke violence. The bot networks are all activating simultaneously. Captain Lee felt a chill of recognition. They're trying to start a global war. If they can get the major powers to attack each other with nuclear weapons, they won't need to invade. They can just wait for us to destroy ourselves, then move in to claim what's left. The team realized they were facing a threat beyond anything in human experience. An unknown alien intelligence had been manipulating human civilization for decades, turning humanity's own nature against itself. Billions of people had no idea that their thoughts and actions were being influenced by forces beyond their understanding. But the team also realized that they had advantages the aliens might not expect. Human adaptability and creativity had allowed them to discover the manipulation despite its sophistication. Human cooperation had brought together specialists from different fields to solve a problem none of them could have handled alone. Most importantly, Human determination would drive them to find a way to fight back against an enemy that thought they understood humanity completely. Dr. Kim looked around at her companions, seeing the same resolve in their eyes that she felt in her heart. We need to warn everyone. Every government, every military, every person who can help coordinate a response. Captain Jaewon Lee stood before the emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, holding a tablet that contained evidence of humanity's greatest threat. The hastily arranged meeting had brought together world leaders who had been enemies just hours before. The proof was undeniable. Every major conflict of the past decade showed clear signs of artificial manipulation by an unknown alien intelligence. The Security Council chamber buzzed with tense conversations as delegates absorbed the shocking revelations. The American president sat next to the Chinese premier, both studying data that showed how their recent trade war had been artificially escalated. The Russian representative examined evidence that their military interventions had been influenced by modified intelligence reports. European leaders discovered that their immigration disputes had been amplified by carefully crafted social media campaigns. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Lee began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. "We have been at war for decades without knowing it. Our enemy has been using our own nature against us, turning our differences into weapons of mass destruction." Dr. Hana Kim stepped forward to explain the technical aspects of the discovery. Her quantum communication array had been modified to project holographic displays showing the alien signal patterns. "These transmissions have been altering our communications in real time. News reports, social media posts, even private messages between government officials have been subtly changed to promote conflict and division." The Chinese premier leaned forward in his chair. "You're saying that alien forces have been manipulating our societies for decades?" "Not just manipulating," Dr. Minho Park interjected, pulling up his analysis of the signal patterns. "They've been learning. Each intervention has been more sophisticated than the last. They've been studying our psychology, our social structures, our weaknesses, and using that knowledge to make us fight each other more effectively." General Sun Ho Choi presented the military implications. "Based on our analysis, they're preparing for a final phase operation. All the manipulation has been leading to this moment. They want to trigger a global nuclear war that will leave Earth devastated and easy to conquer." The room fell silent as the full scope of the threat became clear. World leaders who had spent years viewing each other as enemies suddenly realized they had been puppets in an alien scheme. The hatred and suspicion they had felt toward other nations had been artificially amplified by forces beyond their comprehension. Specialist Yuna Choi displayed intercepted communications that showed the coordination behind recent global crises. "Every terrorist attack, every economic crisis, every diplomatic breakdown has been timed to create maximum instability. They're not random events. They're part of a deliberate campaign to weaken human civilization." The Brazilian representative asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How do we fight an enemy we can't see using technology we don't understand?" Dongwoo Nam, the civilian hacker who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "We use their own methods against them. They've been infiltrating our networks for decades, but that infiltration works both ways. I've been tracing their signals back through the systems they've compromised. We can turn their communication channels into weapons." The next 12 hours transformed human civilization more completely than any previous event in history. Dr. Kim's quantum communication technology became the backbone of a new global defense network. Her equipment could cut through alien interference and provide secure communications between world military forces. Scientists and engineers from every major nation worked together to rapidly deploy quantum transmitters across the globe. Dr. Park led teams of linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists in decoding alien transmissions. They discovered that the Vorthak used mathematical concepts that humans had never encountered, but human creativity allowed them to find new approaches to understanding alien logic. More importantly, they learned to recognize the psychological manipulation techniques embedded in the alien signals. Within 18 hours, every space-capable military on Earth had been integrated into a single command structure. General Choi, found himself coordinating with Russian cosmonauts, American astronauts, Chinese taikonauts, and space forces from nations that had been bitter enemies just days before. The Unified Command represented the largest cooperative military operation in human history. The human response was terrifying in its speed and efficiency. Weapon systems that had been pointed at each other for decades were suddenly redirected toward space. Nuclear missiles were reconfigured for use against alien targets. Space stations became military command centers. Communication satellites were repurposed as sensor networks to detect alien activities in the solar system. Dongwu and his team of hackers achieved the impossible. They successfully infiltrated alien computer systems. The Vorthak had been so focused on manipulating human communications that they had left themselves vulnerable to counter-infiltration. Human hackers discovered that alien technology, while more advanced, followed logical patterns that could be exploited. They think like a hive mind, Dongwu explained to the Unified Command staff. Every decision goes through centralized processing. If we can disrupt their communication network, we can create chaos in their ranks. The psychological warfare component of humanity's response was led by Specialist Choi, who had been analyzing alien behavioral patterns. They've studied our psychology for decades, but we've learned their psychology too. They're rigid, hierarchical, and dependent on central authority. They can't adapt to chaos the way humans can. The Vorthak fleet, still hidden behind Jupiter, detected what appeared to be the final collapse of human civilization. Their sensors showed nuclear explosions across Earth's surface, massive military movements, and complete breakdown of international communications. To alien observers, it looked exactly like the global war they had been trying to provoke. Admiral Kithvar watched the displays with satisfaction, unaware that the nuclear explosions were carefully coordinated pyrotechnic displays designed to fool alien sensors. The military movements were indeed massive, but they represented cooperation rather than conflict. The communication breakdown was actually the deployment of quantum communication networks that the aliens couldn't intercept or decode. Begin final approach, Admiral Kithvar ordered. The humans have destroyed themselves just as we predicted. We will arrive to find a broken world ready for conquest. The Vorthak fleet began moving toward Earth, confident that they would face only scattered resistance from the survivors of humanity's self-destruction. They had no idea that every piece of space debris, every satellite, every probe in the solar system had been weaponized or repositioned during the past day. Captain Lee, now commanding the unified Earth Defense Fleet, monitored the alien approach from a command center deep beneath Seoul. Screens around him showed the positions of human forces throughout the solar system. Weapons platforms disguised as communication satellites waited in Earth orbit. Nuclear missiles launched from submarines hung motionless in space, their trajectories calculated to intercept the alien fleet. Even the International Space Station had been converted into a weapons platform. "They're coming," reported a technician monitoring deep space sensors. 200 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Dr. Kim's quantum communication arrays allowed perfect coordination between thousands of defense platforms. Every human weapon system received targeting data simultaneously. Every commander knew exactly when to fire and where to aim. The coordination was so precise that it seemed almost supernatural to the aliens monitoring human activities. General Choi spoke into his communicator, addressing military commanders across the globe. "This is it. Everything we've worked for in the past day comes down to the next few hours. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to prove that humanity cannot be conquered by those who think they understand us." The Vorthak had spent 47 years studying human warfare and had concluded that humans were chaotic but predictable in their chaos. They expected to find a planet torn apart by nuclear war, defended by scattered military units operating without coordination or central command. Instead, they found themselves flying into the most carefully prepared trap in military history. Dr. Park's analysis of alien psychology had revealed their greatest weakness. They could not comprehend how a species as individualistic as humanity could achieve perfect coordination when facing an external threat. The Vorthak understanding of human behavior was based on observing conflicts between human groups, but they had never seen humans unite against a common enemy. Dongwu's infiltration of alien computer systems had provided detailed information about Vorthak ship capabilities, weapon systems, and tactical doctrine. Human forces knew exactly how their enemies would respond to different threats. More importantly, they knew how to exploit the rigid command structure that made Vorthak forces predictable. As the alien fleet approached Earth, Admiral Kithvar felt confident about the upcoming conquest. His species had defeated 17 worlds using variations of the same strategy. Humans might be chaotic and unpredictable individually. The Vorthak fleet materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system in perfect formation, 200 sleek ships emerging from faster-than-light travel with the precision that had conquered 17 worlds. Admiral Kithvar stood on his command bridge watching Earth grow larger on his displays. The planet showed all the signs of the devastation he had expected: radiation signatures from nuclear explosions, disrupted communication networks, and scattered military activities that suggested complete social collapse. "Begin scanning for survivors," Admiral Kithvar ordered his crew. "We need to identify any remaining military installations before we commence planetary occupation." What the Vorthak scanners detected seemed to confirm their expectations. Earth's surface showed evidence of recent nuclear explosions, massive troop movements, and complete breakdown of organized government. The electromagnetic spectrum was filled with chaotic communications that suggested panicked civilians and disorganized military units. Everything indicated that humanity had finally succumbed to the divisions that the Vorthak had been carefully nurturing for 47 years. Captain Jaewon Lee watched the alien fleet from his command post aboard the hidden defense platform, Aegis 1, positioned behind Earth's moon. His displays showed perfect tracking data on every Vorthak ship, provided by Dr. Hana Kim's quantum sensor network. The aliens had no idea that their chaotic human communications were actually perfectly coordinated quantum transmissions that could not be intercepted or decoded. "All units report ready," came the voice of General Sunho Choi from the unified command center in Seoul. "Operation Humanity's Fist is authorized to commence on your mark, Captain Lee." Lee felt the weight of history in that moment. Humanity had never faced an existential threat like this, but they had also never been so perfectly united in purpose. Every nation on Earth had contributed to the defense effort. Every weapon system had been coordinated into a single devastating response. Every human in space was prepared to sacrifice everything to protect their home world. "Mark," Captain Lee said quietly into his communicator. The first hour of the 4-hour war began with what appeared to be complete silence. The Vorthak fleet continued its approach toward Earth, confident that they faced only scattered resistance from the survivors of humanity's civil war. Admiral Kithvar was already planning the deployment of occupation forces when his sensors detected the first signs that something was wrong. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the inner solar system," reported his sensor officer. "It appears to be weapons fire, but the targeting solutions don't make sense." Before Admiral Kithvar could respond, space around his fleet exploded into deadly chaos. Kinetic projectiles launched from Earth struck Vorthak ships with incredible precision. Nuclear missiles that had been drifting motionless in space suddenly activated their engines and accelerated toward alien targets. Asteroids that had been nudged into new orbits weeks earlier revealed themselves as massive kinetic weapons moving at incredible velocity. The attack came from every direction simultaneously. Human forces had turned the entire inner solar system into a weapons platform. Communication satellites revealed hidden missile batteries. Space debris concealed nuclear warheads. Even the International Space Station opened fire with weapons that had been installed during the frantic preparation period. Dr. Kim's quantum communication arrays allowed perfect coordination between thousands of separate weapon systems. Every projectile was timed to arrive at its target within microseconds of every other projectile. The Vorthak found themselves under attack from directions they had never considered, using tactics they had never encountered. "Shields up, return fire," Admiral Kithvar shouted, but his fleet was already reeling from the coordinated assault. Vorthak ships were designed to fight other space fleets in organized formations. They were not prepared for the chaos of human warfare where every piece of space debris might be a weapon, and every communication satellite might be a missile launcher. The second hour began with the Vorthak attempt to retreat and regroup. Their superior technology gave them advantages in shield strength and firepower, but human tactics negated those advantages. Dr. Minho Park's analysis of alien psychology had predicted exactly how they would respond to the initial attack. Human forces were ready for every predictable Vorthak countermove. Dongwu Nam and his team of hackers struck during the confusion of the alien retreat. They had spent days infiltrating Vorthak computer systems, and now they activated their digital weapons. Navigation systems began providing false readings. Communication networks carried contradictory orders. Weapon systems targeted friendly ships instead of human forces. "What's happening to our systems?" Admiral Kithvar demanded as his fleet's formation began to disintegrate. Half his ships were reporting navigation failures, while the other half were receiving orders that contradicted his commands. The answer came from an impossible source. His own communication system began broadcasting in perfect Vorthak language, but the words came from human sources. Specialist Unit Choi had learned enough about alien psychology to craft messages that exploited their cognitive biases and social weaknesses. "Vorthak Fleet, this is Earth Defense Command," came the voice in flawless alien syntax. "Your infiltration. Networks have been compromised for the past 72 hours. Every order you have received has been generated by human intelligence. Your fleet is exactly where we wanted it to be." The psychological impact on the Vorthak was devastating. They had spent decades studying human psychology, but they had never considered that humans might learn to understand alien psychology in return. The rigid hierarchy that made Vorthak society efficient also made it vulnerable to the kind of chaos that humans could create and manage. The third hour saw the complete breakdown of Vorthak command structure. Individual ship commanders found themselves unable to verify orders from their superiors. Communication delays caused by human interference meant that coordinated responses became impossible. Some ships tried to retreat while others attempted to advance, creating collisions and friendly fire incidents throughout the alien fleet. General Choi coordinated the human response with the precision of a master strategist who had been planning this battle for decades rather than days. Every human weakness that the Vorthak had identified and exploited became a strength in actual combat. Human unpredictability made their tactics impossible to counter. Human creativity allowed them to use weapons and strategies that alien logic could not anticipate. "They're trying to establish a new command frequency," reported a human technician monitoring alien communications. "Should we jam it?" "No," replied Dongwu from his hacking station. "Let them establish the frequency, then feed them false data. Make them think they're regaining control while we manipulate their responses." The deception worked perfectly. Vorthak commanders began receiving what appeared to be legitimate orders from Admiral Kithvar, but the commands were actually generated by human computers using psychological profiles that Dr. Park had developed. The aliens were being manipulated by the same techniques they had used against humanity, but with a speed and creativity that their rigid minds could not match. Captain Lee watched the tactical displays as the alien fleet scattered across the inner solar system. Individual Vorthak ships were still dangerous, but they were no longer fighting as a coordinated force. Human weapons platforms continued their relentless assault, picking off isolated targets with precision that demonstrated the effectiveness of unified human command. The fourth hour began with Admiral Kithvar's desperate gambit. Realizing that his invasion had failed completely, he attempted to implement a scorched earth strategy. If the Vorthak could not conquer Earth, they would at least deny it to humanity by destroying the planet with their most powerful weapons. "All ships target Earth directly," Admiral Kithvar ordered. "Charge planet-killer weapons and prepare to glass the entire surface." But General Choi had anticipated this possibility. The most heavily defended positions in the human battle plan were not around Earth itself, but around the locations where planet-killer weapons would need to be positioned for maximum effectiveness. As Vorthak ships moved into firing positions, they found themselves facing the concentrated firepower of Earth's entire nuclear arsenal. Dr. Kim's quantum sensors provided targeting data of impossible precision. Human nuclear missiles that had been positioned throughout the solar system converged on the Vorthak ships attempting to target Earth. The aliens' planet-killer weapons were destroyed before they could fire, taking their ships with them in spectacular explosions that lit up the darkness of space. "Admiral, we've lost 60% of our fleet," reported a Vorthak officer, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Human resistance is far beyond our projections. They're fighting with coordination we've never seen from any species." Admiral Keith Var stared at his displays in shock. Everything the Vorthak had learned about humans suggested that they should be incapable of this level of organization. Their society was too individualistic, too chaotic, too divided by competing interests. Yet somehow they had achieved perfect military coordination while maintaining the creative unpredictability that made their tactics impossible to counter. 3 months after the 4-hour war, Dr. Hana Kim stood in her laboratory at the Seoul Institute of Technology. But everything had changed. The room that had once housed her experimental quantum communication array now served as the hub of a galactic communication network. Her breakthrough had become the foundation for humanity's expansion into space, connecting Earth with colonies and research stations throughout the solar system. The Vorthak prisoners held in facilities across Earth had proven to be an unexpected source of knowledge about galactic civilization. Unlike humans, the aliens seemed incapable of deception or strategic thinking when separated from their command structure. They answered questions with mechanical honesty, providing detailed information about the 17 worlds they had conquered and the dozens of other species that populated the galaxy. Dr. Minho Park led the xenodiplomacy team that made first contact with other galactic civilizations. The news of humanity's victory over the Vorthak had spread quickly through alien communication networks, creating reactions that ranged from celebration to terror. Some species wanted to form alliances with these chaotic but effective humans, while others feared that humanity might be even more dangerous than the Vorthak had been. The galaxy has been locked in a state of technological and social stagnation for millennia, Dr. Park explained to the United Nations Assembly. Most species follow rigid patterns of development that make them predictable and ultimately vulnerable to conquest. The Vorthak exploited this predictability to build their empire, but humanity represents something entirely new in galactic history. The first alien ambassadors to visit Earth were representatives of the Kepler Union, a coalition of worlds that had successfully resisted Vorthak conquest through defensive alliances. Their delegation arrived aboard a ship that was technologically superior to anything humans had built, but their representatives seemed genuinely nervous about meeting the species that had defeated the Vorthak in just 4 hours. Ambassador Velnara of the Kepler Union addressed the Earth Assembly with obvious unease. "Your species has accomplished something we thought impossible. The Vorthak had been expanding their empire for over 1,000 years. Many of us believed they were unstoppable. Your victory has changed the balance of power in the galaxy." Captain Jaewon Lee, now Admiral Lee, commanded Earth's expanding space fleet from his headquarters on Luna Base. Human ships built with hybrid human-Vorthak technology were exploring the galaxy and establishing contact with other species. But they were not conquerors in the traditional sense. Instead, they offered something the galaxy had never seen before, a combination of advanced technology and genuine cooperation. The human approach to galactic relations was revolutionary. Where other species had rigid diplomatic protocols and formal alliance structures, humans brought flexibility and creativity. They could adapt their communication styles to match alien psychology while maintaining their essential humanity. They could form partnerships based on mutual benefit, rather than dominance or submission. General Sunho Choi had been appointed as Earth's first Minister of Galactic Defense, a position that required him to coordinate not just Earth's military forces but also defensive alliances with other species who had suffered under Vorthak rule. His experience in unified command during the 4-hour war had prepared him for the complex task of managing interspecies military cooperation. The Vorthak conquest strategy was based on isolation, General Choi explained to a gathering of alien military leaders. They would identify a species' weaknesses, then prevent them from seeking help or forming alliances. But humans have shown that cooperation can overcome technological disadvantages. When species work together, They become stronger than the sum of their parts. His daughter, Yuna Choi, had become Earth's chief xenopsychologist, helping other species understand human behavior while helping humans understand alien psychology. Her work was crucial in preventing the misunderstandings that had led to so many galactic conflicts in the past. She had discovered that most alien species were capable of cooperation, but had never learned to achieve it across species boundaries. Humans are not unique in our capacity for cooperation, Specialist Choi told a conference of galactic psychologists. What makes us different is our ability to cooperate with beings who think differently than we do. Most species can only form alliances with others who share their basic psychological patterns. Humans can work with anyone. Dongwoo Nam led the new Galactic Cybersecurity Division, tasked with ensuring that no species could manipulate others, the way the Vorthak had manipulated humanity. His team of hackers had become protectors of galactic communication networks, developing security protocols that prevented the kind of systematic deception that had characterized Vorthak operations. The Vorthak weren't evil in the way humans understand evil, Dongwoo explained to a gathering of alien computer specialists. They were simply following their nature, which was to find the most efficient way to expand their influence. But efficiency, without morality, leads to oppression. Our job is to make sure that technology serves all species, not just the ones clever enough to exploit it. The greatest irony of the situation was that the Vorthak's 47-year scheme had ultimately made humanity stronger. By forcing humans to recognize their own capacity for manipulation and division, the aliens had inadvertently taught humanity to overcome those weaknesses. The species that had spent nearly half a century learning to exploit human nature had created a humanity that was more unified and more aware of its own potential than ever before. The former Vorthak territories presented a complex challenge for the new galactic order. 17 worlds had been under alien rule for generations. Their populations adapted to hierarchical command structures that stifled creativity and individual initiative. The liberated species needed to learn how to govern themselves while developing the technologies and social structures necessary for independence. Dr. Kim found herself leading rehabilitation efforts on several former Vorthak worlds, using her quantum communication technology to establish networks that promoted cooperation rather than control. The challenge isn't just technological, she explained to her team. These species have been conditioned to follow orders without question. We need to help them rediscover their capacity for independent thought. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but it was also inspiring. Species that had been reduced to slave labor under Vorthak rule began to develop their own cultures and technologies. Some showed remarkable creativity once freed from the constraints of alien control. Others struggled with the concept of self-determination, but gradually learned to value freedom over security. Admiral Lee's exploration fleets discovered that the galaxy was far more diverse than anyone had imagined. The Vorthak had conquered the most advanced civilizations, but dozens of other species had avoided contact by remaining hidden or isolated. These species emerged from hiding once news of the Vorthak defeat spread, eager to join the new galactic community that humans were helping to create. The human exploration philosophy was fundamentally different from traditional galactic expansion, where most species sought to find resources or establish dominance. Humans seemed genuinely interested in learning about other forms of life. They approached each new species with curiosity rather than suspicion, offering friendship rather than demanding submission. Humans collect allies the way other species collect resources, observed Ambassador Velnara in a report to the Kepler Union Council. They seem to genuinely enjoy diversity and seek out beings who think differently than they do. This approach creates networks of cooperation that are far more resilient than traditional hierarchical structures. The economic implications of human galactic expansion were profound. The Vorthak had maintained their empire through resource extraction and tribute collection, creating an economy based on exploitation and scarcity. Humans introduced concepts of trade partnerships and mutual benefit that revolutionized galactic commerce. Dr. Park's xenodiplomacy teams facilitated trade, agreements that allowed species to exchange technologies and resources on terms that benefited everyone involved. The result was a period of rapid technological advancement, as different species shared their innovations and learned from each other's approaches to common problems. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species that had benefited from the old galactic order resented the changes that human influence brought. Others struggled to adapt to the faster pace of change that characterized human-influenced regions of space. A few attempted to recreate Vorthak-style empires, only to discover that other species were no longer willing to accept domination. But the overall trend was clear. The galaxy was becoming more connected, more cooperative, and more creative than it had been in millennia. The rigid patterns that had characterized galactic civilization were giving way to the dynamic, chaotic, and ultimately more productive approach that humans brought to everything they touched. As Dr. Kim looked out at the stars from her laboratory, now filled with communication signals from dozens of worlds, she reflected on how much had changed since that night when alien signals first flooded her quantum array.